I wasn't supposed to be in that room. I was just the kid with the backpack and the granola bar who tags along while his mom cleans offices after school, keeping my head down while grown-ups speak a language that sounds like power and coffee. But that morning on the 39th floor, the power was gone. The screens were black, voices were low, and the number that floated through the glass like bad weather was $320 million a day, bleeding out, while hospitals waited on records and small shops couldn't run cards. And the CEO, Eleanor Vance, was gripping her phone so tight, her knuckles went pale, and a board member said, "Bankruptcy," and the air got colder. And that's when my mouth moved faster than my fear, and I said real soft, but somehow loud enough, "Can I look at one of the computers?" And chairs creaked like a warning, and a security guy did a full-body eye roll, and my mom touched my shoulder like a seatbelt, but Eleanor didn't laugh. Maybe she was too tired to gatekeep hope. She just said, "5 minutes, kid, show him the logs." They pulled up these bleeding red error lines that looked like rain, if rain could panic, and I didn't pretend to read every word. I listened for the beat. Because bad code has a rhythm, and buried in a legacy config, no one touched, unless everything new failed and ran home to the old. There it was, a single trailing comma in a JSON block, tiny, stupid, mean, the kind of thing that makes a parser choke and then convinces every neighbor to choke with it. And I didn't shout like I'd found fire. I just pointed and said that comma shouldn't be there. And the bearded consultant went from annoyed to milk white. In 5 seconds, hit backspace, hit deploy, and at first nothing. Then the floor sighed, a screen blinked awake, then another. A dashboard shifted from red to yellow like a sunrise that forgot its schedule. Someone whispered, "Thank God," like they weren't sure. God listened to kids, and someone else said, "It can't be that, we checked that." And I shook my head. You checked the fancy new stuff. Panic makes people forget the old staircases. I wish the story ended at the miracle fix, but the truth is, the cheers got swallowed by new alerts. The kind that don't wobble, they stalk. And I pointed at a river in the logs that didn't belong. Who's pulling terabytes out of your storage vault at 3 a.m. and stamping at maintenance? And now the room felt the thing I'd been feeling since I sat down. This wasn't just a crash. Someone pushed us into a ditch and started stripping parts while we were calling a tow truck, and the security director wanted to yank the plug on everything. But that's how you slam a door on a thief who's already in your living room. If you do it fast, he lights a match on the way out, so I told Eleanor. I could slow them quietly, like making them walk a long hallway, instead of riding the elevator, a little rate limit. Here an extra handshake, there a decoy subnet, with nothing in the fridge but cameras. You know what I mean, small slows, that don't look like no, and it worked for a minute. The graph bent, the flow thinned, then the thieves noticed the hallway got longer, and they started sprinting. The downloads spiked, targeted deletions began, not random, surgical. Customer data and financial records dropped off the cliff, while internal chats stayed untouched, like a museum exhibit. And I said, "He isn't just stealing, he's leaving a message." That's when I asked for permission to trace while he was busy steplight. No hero moves, just follow the footprints. And my mom's hand got tighter, and I felt the tug, the part of me that wanted to be a kid and go home and eat cereal from a mug because we don't have enough bowls, and the part of me that saw nurses refreshing screens and small shop owners waiting for a payment that never clears. And Eleanor asked, "What do you need?" And I said, "Time." The maze wasn't one line. It never is. It was mirrors and fake doors. But even a good maze leaves fingerprints, a weird TTL here, a lazy cipher suite there, a neglected relay sitting in a rented rack near the Phoenix freight yards. And inside that relay was a neat little trophy case of other companies, folders, with names I recognized from headlines that had fizzled at just the wrong time. And the metadata that tied our mess to one person read like insult comedy. Lionel Pike, the guy who used to run cybersecurity here, fired 9 months ago for misalignment. which is what suits say when the bridges are on fire and they don't want to point. And before we could draft a statement, the wall of screens exploded with timers and red text, and a big insult in a font that tried too hard. And I felt small for the first time, like my hands were too small for the keyboard. Like my stomach knew I was 10, even if my brain didn't. And my mom knelt and said, "Baby, we can walk, let them figure it out." And I looked at the logs and thought about the donut guy who shows up at 6 because his kid needs braces, and I didn't feel brave, I felt heavy. Yeah, that happened, and I said, "I'm staying." I stopped throwing pebbles at the train and went looking for the locomotive because anger makes smart men theatrical, and theaters have doors. Lionel orchestrated his attack with a command bus that looked invisible until you watched his tempo, like a video game boss with tells, and I traced it backward. 2 hops, 6, a dozen, into a data center near the Suns arena. A command cluster he thought was untouchable because it hid in plain sight, and I said, "Found him." And I felt anger warm my hands in a way that didn't scare me. Then I flipped the job from guard to mirror. He had turned our servers into soldiers against other targets, so I wrote thin rules shaped like his own tricks that bounced his punches back at his jaw, not fireworks, just physics, and his command servers started choking on their own smoke, and the consultant whispered, "He's reflecting payloads," like he couldn't believe Audacity comes in kid sizes, and Lionel noticed. Of course he did, and the flood went human. You can feel it. When it's a person, the feints get pretty. The rhythm goes sly. He wrapped his signals tight, and I peeled them with tricks. I learned cracking game saves that don't want to be cracked. He opened new edges. I closed them with moves. I made up 5 seconds earlier, because rulebooks are slow, and then pride spoke. A chat window crawled across the glass. "Who are you? Show yourself." And my hands shook, but for a different reason. I looked at Eleanor, and she nodded like a coach. "Who knows you've got the shot?" So I typed, "Hi Lionel. I'm Jaden. I'm 10. I learned online my mom cleans this office, and the silence on the other side was so loud, the building seemed to lean in. Then his replies came fast and ugly, and Eleanor hit a key that saved everything and started dialing. Agent Carla Ruiz picked up. "We have an active actor. A command cluster, evidence of coordinated hits. Can you move now?" And the agent said, "Keep him talking. We're moving." While the sirens stayed off stage, I finished the part. Nobody asked me to touch the money trail out of the relay led to a lazy shell and a ledger that made my teeth hurt. Hit lists timed to product launches and mergers dips that lined up with short positions. Companies bought for pennies after someone burned their house down and called it a bad stove. And the twist that hurts more than the name reveal is this one right here. It wasn't just revenge, it was a business model. A quiet market rig with a bully for hire. And once you see the string up the magician's sleeve, you can't unsee it. The attack stuttered, then sagged, then stopped, like somebody pulled the battery out of the storm. The radios on Agent Ruiz's end went from sprint to stroll. People in windbreakers moved fast in a place I wasn't. And our room remembered how to be human. The bearded consultant cried without sound. My mom let Eleanor hug me and gave me that look that means we're going to talk about what you do online. And I nodded, because fair. And a couple days later, the agent came back with a folder and a face that had finally slept and said, "This goes past your angry ex. It touches people who sit in rooms without windows. And I learned a new kind of fear, the kind where the guy you beat is level 3, and there are bosses you don't see." And months later, I sat in a chair too big, under lights, too bright, and I said, what I said that first day: computers don't care how old you are. They care if you understand them. And folks laughed. Not mean, just surprised. And Eleanor talked about how she used to worship resumes and got saved by a kid who eats cereal from a mug. And she announced scholarships for kids who code at kitchen tables and public libraries. and my mom cried into a napkin she pretended was for her allergies. I'm not calling myself a hero. Heroes sleep better. I still jump when a browser freezes. I still hear the hush of that black room sometimes and smell cold coffee, but I stand a little taller when the security director asks me to teach him how to think like a player instead of a policy, and I tell him the truth. It's not about breaking rules for fun, it's about seeing patterns the rule book forgot to teach, and it's also about people the way someone says please in a hallway, or how a boardroom can look straight through the person emptying the trash, like they're a rolling cart, instead of somebody's parent with a name because that blindness is the bug under the bug, you know what I mean. So let me ask you this and be real, was Eleanor reckless for giving a kid 5 minutes? Or was that the bravest thing a leader did all year? Are we so in love with pedigrees that we miss raw talent, sitting 2 feet away with untied laces when markets get gamed in the dark? Who carries the blame? The hands that typed the code, or the wallets that paid for the wreck? Tell me in the comments, argue with me if you have to cut the cord or follow the trail. What would you have done in that room? And if you've ever been underestimated, tell me how you turned that into a win. I'll be in there reading, because justice doesn't happen in silence.